the show today, Donnalea Van Vleet Goelz. I might need a correction with that, but I like her very much. She does continuum movement. We're going to find out all about that. This is one of my new loves, so I'm looking forward to this one. And Donnalea, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're just saying you're in Florida, right?
I am.
Let's start with your story then. How did you get interested in the body? And then we'll take that into your continuum teacher later on. So what was the beginning of your sort of embodiment journey?
Boy, did you just ask a good question. So here's the real truth. I come from a family of sports people. My mother happened to be the world's champion lady wrestler back in the 1950s and 60s.
Wow.
So I was born with a mother that was very physical and, for play, and we did monkey flips and all kinds of things in the wrestling ring as a 3 year old with your mother. So this love of body was just very, very important to her. And, you know, uh, my father was he had a lot of different things that he did, but one of the things he did was that he loved sports also. And he promoted um, wrestling, boxing. He actually promoted back in the time of the Negro Leagues. And so I grew up with people like Satchel Paige. I was trained to box by Ezra Charles, who was the heavyweight champion of the world.
Wow, that's so cool. So you're a little
So
girl and you're being trained to box and like this big dude, I'm imagining, yeah?
exactly. I mean, I'd go running with him. It was just, that was my life. So I grew up with thinking body and moving, and it was so important. So, and it was playful too.
Where was this, in the United States?
Yes, my first years, we just traveled. I was always on the road with my mother, traveling as she would go around. So actually, by the time I was two, I had been to 48 states.
Oh,
But there were only 48 states when I was two. And I did get to go to the territory of Alaska. When the first time I went to Alaska, it was the territory of Alaska. And then I finally made it to Hawaii, 20
just
or
dating
30.
you a little bit between the Negro Leagues and this. I mean, this is just in case listeners think you're sort of using some racist slur. This was the terminology at the time, I'm imagining. Yeah. So,
Absolutely, and it's the
where was this?
proper way. Yeah, it's the proper way to say it. And I just um, the reason my father was a promoter and was dear friends with, he just could not believe that black people were not allowed to play professional sports. They were some of the most talented people around, and they were locked out. Actually, Hank Aaron was on his team also. He couldn't make it into, they would not let him into the higher leagues. So it was just a crazy time. So I grew up in that time of racial prejudices. And Ezra Charles, for instance, we used to get turned away from restaurants. We used to get told we could not stay in hotels. It was a hard time, but how would I put it? I do see progress being made, and I was really happy this year happened. I don't want to get political on
We
things,
can
but
come back to that.
you
We can establish sort of your main practices first, but we can come back to that. No need to, we can go there. Okay, so Continuum, I think the official name is Continuum Movement. Is that right?
yes, yes.
About this as a practice, because it's not as widely known as some things, and I'd like it to be better known. I'd like this podcast to be a vehicle for, getting different embodied practices known. This is one that I didn't discover for years and years and years, and I'm literally just coming across, and I'm Mr. Embodiment, right? So let's put it out there a little bit. What is it? Where does it come from?
Okay, well, it was really created and founded by Emilie Conrad, and it was probably, she dates that as 1967, and she grew up in New York City. She was a Dunham dancer. She then got a job in Haiti, and that just what would I say? Not transferred, but just changed her life. And the rituals of Haiti, the undulation, the movement of the people of nature, And when she went back to New York City and the concrete and the cold and
That's a hell
there's
of a
this
contrast, right? That's a hell.
exactly. So it was like, oh my gosh. So she returned and went inside and just really found her sanity by going inside and from the body, listen to the body and the body's wisdom. Um, what you can say about continuum, there's a lot of different things. Um, well, one of the things I like to say is continuum movement is an inquiry into what it means to be a human being. And what that means is that we really go inside and explore ourselves, and we don't just see ourselves as a biped, a Homo sapien. We see ourselves on one level as that biologically, but also we see our connections to being cosmic beings, to being, connected to, the universe, the wholeness of the universe. So it's really um, it's a very wide scope that Continuum has. We use movement, sound, and breath in order to really evoke what our fluid system, and that we are 70% water is considered very important, and that we're fluid beings. We're not mechanical beings. We're not made of metal. We're liquid. So,
Okay, so lots there. It's a big practice. I'm just starting to explore it. I really enjoyed the 3-hour workshop I did the other day. I've got in my diary to do the remote one that's recorded this weekend. I'm enthusiastic about it, but just beginning. And I guess it's famous for this fluid piece, right? So
right.
lots of things use breath and sound, and maybe it uses sound more than some. But there's this famous video of someone's back. I don't know if it's Emilie Conrad's or someone else's, and it's sort of undulating, beautiful back. I'm sure you could, if you went to YouTube and typed in Continuum, it's this, and it's like, wow, I thought the back was this stiff, bony thing, and then it's like this sort of sexy jellyfish undulating. And that to me is the image that comes to mind when I think Continuum. I think maybe for many people.
It is. I mean, that, and the thing about undulating and, exploring and using your body in a fluid way, you know what, Mark? It becomes pleasurable. It's, I grew up, I studied ballet, I mean, I've studied all kinds of somatics. I've been involved in the somatics, I think, world since, well, my first classes were in the 70s in New York. And, I just find that continual movement by going inside, connecting to the fluid system, that when I do that, I not only get physically fit, I also mentally relax, de stress. I also have this feeling of a wholeness, which is what I define spirituality to be, a feeling whole. And it's just really, it's just fantastic, actually.
And I guess it's also known, tell me, I guess there's different parts, so tell me if I'm wrong, for this kind of spontaneous, like it's not led like a yoga class, right? Like I was in a hatha yoga class last night and it's like stand up, sit down, stretch this way, stretch that way. There's a much more of a sort of body led approach to it.
Well, Emily, I think she, a lot of times things are shaped by our background. And actually, one of the things I think she said, we have what's called Emilyisms, and it's really brilliant things that she said. And one of them is she said, everything is an explicate of your nervous system. Meaning that, if you're, how you feel, do you feel safe, for instance, as our friend Steve Porges would talk about our nervous system, or do you have fear, do you have anxiety, and then everything around you, the way you decorate, the way you dress, the way you enjoy things comes from an inside perspective. And how would I put it, she just would, the inner wisdom of the body, when we tune to that, I was so used to being trained from outside, plie, and corrected from the outside. But when I learned to go inside and and connect to my body in a very deep way, I was actually rather shocked at how brilliant my inner thoughts, and how I knew how to unwind. I knew what my body needed. So it's a very different perspective. Um, we're connected, I guess. I love philosophy. That's one of my other things. So phenomenology and the experience, the inner experience, which is what really somatics, I think, is really all about. So.
There's almost, I'd see a, I don't want to use the word continuum, but maybe a spectrum of practices from the very form-led, and that's often where people start. You know, I started with form-based Aikido, moved to more formless Aikido. And I started off with more form-based yoga. These times, whenever the teacher's got her back turned, I'm secretly doing Feldenkrais and Continuum, which is like, you know, like, because it sort of feels better to follow my own body, which you can't really do at first. Some beginners just, they just lost in that. I think had I discovered Continuum 20 years ago, I might have just felt like, what do I do? You know? And whereas it seems as people progress in their somatic journey, they want more subtle and more kind of free practice. Seems
As you become, yeah, as you become wiser and you're more connected to your body, who knows your body more, Mark, than you? You are the absolute expert on your body. And so as you learn more and you understand and you develop, of course, you're going to really want to come from your own wisdom, because you may have more than someone outside actually is even sharing with you and stuff. The other thing that I would say just struck me is how important we feel it's not to have over structure. We like to break up habits and fixations and structure in our body that's become habitual, and sometimes it's numbing, you know, those habitual responses. So we're going towards an alive present now.
Is there, let me play devil's advocate a little
I
bit.
love that.
So the sort of the form practices, they would say we impose a form because it challenges your neurosis and your habits. And it's sort of, you know, in some ways, like you hold a position and then it, you know, the armoring disintegrates, whatever else. Is there a risk in these freedom practices that we just sort of love the smell of our own shit? You know, we just sort of wallow in our own habitual tendencies.
I, I like what I like being challenged, I guess. So thank you for doing that. But no, I think our bodies, how would I put it? You know, if we do not know how to connect to our bodies, I think that's where we're really in shit. You know, it's like if we have, and we have, I mean, this society, we are so much on, you know, not paying attention to our inner experience, but we're on tablets, we're on computers, we're, you know, and even the fact that with modern society, we are really sped up. You know, think of what the pace of being a human being was 100 years ago or 150 years ago. They didn't have jet planes, they didn't have cars, they didn't, you know, we are go, 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 go. So that slowing down and connecting, I think, is very essential for real sanity and for real compassion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I certainly enjoy it. I get inordinate pleasure now rolling around on the floor. And, you know, it's been great to have a bit of guidance with that through Continuum, but I was sort of discovering something a bit similar myself just through doing lots of practice and realizing that I preferred wriggling to being told what to do. And, you know, other freedom practices like free dance. But I'm certainly enjoying having a little bit of structure or guidance or suggestions, like you can make this noise, or, you know, I find that very helpful.
Right, we have that in Continuum, even though it is an exploration and inquiry into our inner process. We do have certain breaths that we use each, and it's sort of like a recipe or a container for what we're doing. And you know, we usually talk about either doing, you know, doing really slow moves, or we might even we could actually, there's times where we concentrate, say, on a muscle like the latissimus dorsi, or in feeling the latissimus dorsi connecting into your arm, and how that's part of, the evolutionary of the wing and the fin. And, and you do that enough, Mark, you just did it. There's something you got, whoa, there's something here. So,
Yeah, you realize you're an eagle.
yes.
Sense, isn't it? You realize how it all links up, and it's just deeply pleasurable as well. Like I'm shocked at how much pleasure I get from my body now. I'm thinking maybe of giving up sex, because it's just so good to just feel my own body. Like there's just joy in the body for me now that I literally would not have believed possible even 5 years ago.
Well, here's the thing that Emily used to say, and it's probably true. It's like usually people come to Continuum and they do find all this pleasure and joy in their body. Next thing they do is they try to drag their partners. Because just imagine you having all this pleasure and your partner having all this pleasure, then you put it together, it can be good.
I put a video of me dancing up after the Continuum lesson I did with you 2 weeks ago, and I put it up on Facebook, and someone's comment was, "Your wife is very lucky." So I took that as a compliment to the quality of movement in that dance. But that was after your class, and I did it. Great, wow, wonderful. And also something about going in, right? Like, I'm in a place at the moment where there's a lot of sort of Instagram, a lot of people making videos themselves doing yoga and dance and different things, and like that's just almost seems the opposite of Continuum, right? Like to just sort of be externally facing that way. Or not? Tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, I don't know. You know what I like? I'm always, you can't define continuum. That which can be defined is not continuum. And so, it's a little bit like the Taoist saying. And so, I, the name, like you said, it says it all right there. It's a continuum. So I don't know where the boundaries are, and I would say, well, I would just say I don't know where the boundaries are, and I think I'll leave it at that.
It's the Jeet Kune Do of somatics. Jeet Kune Do was Bruce Lee's art, and he said it's formless, it's like water. But the problem he had after he died was that it could be anything and many things, and it was always evolving and was very difficult for sort of to pin down. And that's been its in some ways its undoing. Yeah, it's an interesting comparison actually, Jeet Kune Do.
Well, there's one of my favorite sutras. It's called the Heart Sutra, and its statement is, form is none other than formlessness, and formlessness is none other than form. And when I put those, I'm always feeling that. When I go into the formlessness, there is the form comes out of that, and vice versa. And I have taught, I'm with you. I mean, I love other movements. Continuum movement's not the only thing I do, although I think continuum movement informs everything I do. I've taught Tai Chi for over 30 years, and so I love that form, and then trying to find the fluidity in that form and the formlessness. It's an interesting play.
Yeah. Got the Heart Sutra going through my head in Japanese right now. It's very, once you've been in this, dame, anyway, so Zen retreat. So tell us about the sounding, because that's a bit different. That's not quite as common, I think, as just sort of, somatic, feeling the body. Tell us a little bit about the sounding aspect.
I will. So I do think that Emilie was a true pioneer, and she started using breath and sound together back in the 70s. Now, where did she get it? Well, it was from some of the Haiti chants and different things that were going on. The thing about sound and breath together is it's the fastest way to affect change in the body. It is the fastest way to bring tonal, vagal tone, inside. Brown and Gabbard, who did the things with the yoga breaths and stuff. I've met them. They're just fabulous people. And, it's like we know breath and sound, if you use that and you use movement, the, the chemistry that is going on between all of that is very, very powerful. Sound makes waves, sound waves. And we do know, I mean, if you look at it's great. I love YouTube and all the things, the videos where you can look on YouTube and see how sound, if you put it underneath like sand, will change the sound. And then you change that tone to a different sound, and it changes that sand to a whole different pattern. So that's really, we're playing with that with our bodies, of changing these patterns in our bodies out through the sound breaths.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of makes sense intuitively. Like if you've ever stood by an amplifier at rock conferences, it's doing something to your whole body. It's not just coming in the ears. Like maybe that's an extreme version, but I think we've all sung a beautiful note or been in a church when a choir's been singing and felt like, actually, this is doing something to me here.
Exactly. It's very powerful. Some of the things that I love that have happened in my life is uh, I was very connected to the promoter in Jacksonville. So I had front row seats for Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin. And so I got to have them blast me right from the front row. It was pretty cool. And I can tell you, that vibration, that sound, it changes the body, and you can really feel it with when it's that powerful. But the gentleness, the sounding and that we do, you feel that too, especially if you place it in your body.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I've got more into it these days. It's something that wasn't a big part of my practice, but it's I love this about embodiment, like breath, posture, movement, sounding. There's all these different aspects, and each one of them is a sort of life study, isn't it? Really. So you
It
can
is.
continuously
Absolutely.
discover new. I'm at the moment I'm exploring BMC and Continuum, and
Yes.
it's I did the conference, and it was great to be like a promoter and a leader. And now I'm going back to being a student again. And I'm really enjoying it, just getting on the floor and getting the recordings out. And I'm doing a mixture of some classes face to face here in Mexico, and usually I do 2 classes a day, one face to face and one online. It's about
Uh,
2 to 3 hours a day. It's about as much as I can do with running my business. And it's interesting, this sort of new online context. I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that, teaching Continuum online. You seem to be doing it very successfully.
Well, Emily started it back in 2007. Actually, she did it by conference calls. And like I said, she was ahead of her time. She says, this is going to be how the future is. She predicted there would be a pandemic. She thought there would be a time where ecologically it would be better not to fly as much and do things like that. So and I started teaching online via Zoom. Gosh, it's been 5 years, maybe even 6 years ago.
Really ahead
Yeah,
of the
so
curve.
so it was second nature to me. And so it was like it, and I just really loved it. When Emily started it, I did not think it would be as effective, and I don't know how you're feeling about it, Mark, but would I prefer being in class in person with people? Yes, absolutely. But I'm loving this, and I feel so connected. I'm feeling connected to you right now, and
Right, we've had a couple of Zoom calls. I've been in your class. We're doing the Porges. I mean, it's pros
exactly.
and cons, right? Like on the one hand, the accessibility is amazing. There's people who would never have discovered Continuum who are now your students, right?
Right,
And now through this podcast, there's even more people, right? So there's
right.
this wonderful spreading, democratization. I have friends in Australia. They're never going to come to one of my courses in England. There's people in poorer countries. If you're living in, like, we're getting a lot of hits from India and South Africa in our courses now, for example.
Ah,
Right?
I have India. I don't think. Oh, I've had South Africa too. It's pretty amazing. In a class, I usually have about, well, maybe, let's say if I did a medium, it's about 70. It's usually anywhere from 65 to 80 something people. And they're not always all on live because some people, time changes and things like that. In Australia, it's hard to be on. It's like at 1 o'clock in the morning or something, and stuff, or Japan. And so it is just really fabulous. But in one class, I have had classes where literally that we were dotted all around the whole globe, that, in one class. How cool is that?
I still think it's cool. Like there's someone from like, Bahrain and Iran, and I've got several Iranian Aikido yoga students now, just from online.
Yeah.
And it's like whatever's, I've got big links in Russia, as you know, like this was exotic to my parents, the idea of going to Russia or having students in Iran, kind of unimaginable. And I do love that aspect. And I'm also, just before we press record, I talked about, I was in a meeting with some friends in England, and they were looking pretty run down. Now, I'm in Mexico, you're in Florida, which is pretty open. I was in Florida just before here, actually. And, what do you think's the effect, though, of just having that Zoom, not having, like, continuum seems to be about resonance, right? And I know you love Stephen Porges, your neighbor, polyvagal theory.
Yeah.
Like, this is having an impact on people, though, right?
Right. It definitely is. And so I look at it as, thank God for Zoom, because I think Zoom is mediating some of the impact. It's not completely doing away with it, but
Yes.
we do have social engagement. Right now, you and I are talking. We have our ventral vagal. We're laughing. We can see each other's eyes. We know it's safe. Where if we were just talking on a phone, I mean, I think I would feel it. Zoom is more somatic, I guess. We really get to bring the body in, and that's important.
Yeah, I find that it's, as you say, it's a gift. It's something I'm grateful for. I feel genuine connection when I've built relations. Like you, I've never met in person. We built a relationship through 3 or 4 Zoom calls, and
Yes.
it's like, right, like that's pretty cool. And had like others potentially, it could be anywhere in the world, and it doesn't quite scratch the itch forever, does it? Like I want, like it's almost like a substitute food, like eating vitamin pills instead of fruit. You know what I mean? Like it's better to have a vitamin pill than nothing, but it ain't the same as having an orange or a banana.
Well, here's the real truth too. Last week, so Steve and Sue have gotten their vaccines, and they're through the second vaccine in the wait time. And I'm also, because since I got COVID, and then I had the monoclonal infusion, I have the safety thing. They came over for dinner last week, and we got to hug for the first time in about, what, since last March, I guess. And it would, I mean, there's tears in my eyes right now. I mean, it was like to feel their warmth. It was so sweet and so important. Yes, you can't, there's no substitute for that, Mark. There just really isn't. So.
Maybe for me and you as embodiment teachers, that's obvious, right? That we need social connection, touch, co-regulation, that it's not quite the same. Like we were trying to do the serenity prayer online with a group of people. It's fucking horrible, but Donnalea, I'll tell you. Like because it's not quite synchronized, and that missynchronization is felt in the nervous system. And I worry that people who aren't embodiment nerds like us maybe aren't realizing, or one person I spoke to yesterday said, "Oh, it's like that song, you don't know what you've got till it's gone."
Exactly.
Right? And he said, "Hey, I don't want to go do anything crazy. I just want to go to football again." He goes to the football's like his church.
Right.
Like that's his religion. And he's like, "I just want to go to Starbucks with my friend and have a coffee." And he was saying, "I don't want to do something. I don't want to go to Mexico like you, Mark. I just want a bit of normal life again." And he was using, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone." And maybe it'll be a good thing. Maybe people will realize the power of social connection. We'll certainly be grateful and joyous when we do get to hug again, as you found out with Stephen and Sue.
It is so important. I mean, Steve talks about it, as you know, a lot, and his wife. I don't know if you know her very well, but she is absolutely brilliant. She started the research on oxytocin back in the 80s, and oxytocin is our bonding hormone, and as they learn more and more about oxytocin, we're realizing, that it's oxytocin that helps the nervous system regulate. The Steve and Sue laugh about that they thought they were on separate tracks, in academics and studying things, but it turned out that towards the end of their life now, that their two tracks have actually merged and are entwining. So it's quite beautiful. But we need oxytocin. We need each other. And I think what worries me is more our teenagers, our young kids. I'm a grandmother. It's one of my most precious roles, Mark. And my 13-year-old granddaughter, it's been really, really hard. Can you, and so it's
Teenagers are really looking for that social peer group, and that's so vital for teenagers. And they're sort of demonized in England. Oh, teenagers keep meeting each other. It's because they have to. That's what
it's so biological.
Differentiating from their parents, it's pretty vital when you're a teenager to differentiate from your parents.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think Continuum adds anything else to the sort of this conversation or the wider somatics conversation that is kind of really worth knowing about or hearing about? I mean, as I said, I'm already a fan. I'm going to keep studying. Is there anything you want to sort of underline in red now before we move on?
Well, just that I think it's really important if we are going to survive as a species. I'll get a little serious here with you. If we're going to survive as a species, we have to really start to learn about connecting to ourselves and connecting to others, how important that is. And what I think Continuum does talk about is, it's not the same thing to be connected by phone or even computers. And Continuum talks about we should realize that we are not separate. We're not a different thing than Earth. We are part of this biological process on Earth. We're not a separate thing or a commander of it or a leader. We are part of this process. And as part of this process, are we going to go forward and really create, are we going to evolve into something more positive? Or the Earth is going to keep on going. What I worry about is if we don't change and realize what we're doing to Mother Earth and our climate and things like that, and realize that we're a part of that, we'll be X'd out. It won't. Earth will go on. Life will go on. But I think human beings are beautiful. I think of what we have done, the music we have created, the dance we have created, the books, the poetry. It would be a shame if we don't wake up and start realizing we're biological beings and not mechanistic beings.
Yeah, I don't think we should give the dolphins a chance or the duck-billed platypi or anything like that. I think we should continue as a species and learn some of these extinction serious lessons. You know what I mean? Like it's a funny one, isn't it? Like I look at humanity and I go, wow, we're amazing and we're so cool, but simultaneously it's like, oh my God, we're really on the precipice at the same time.
Well, have you heard the story of dolphins? That they say that at one time they came and actually lived on land. They were terrestrial animals and decided to go back and live in the ocean. This is pretty biologically known, and they almost look like they went back. So maybe we're going to decide to go back.
Well, we're beach monkeys, you know that. We've evolved. We're basically monkeys that live on. I love the idea of beach monkeys. That's basically what we are, semi-aquatic monkeys. We have all these awesome semi-aquatic features. Okay, so beach monkeys, dolphins, going back to where you come from, dolphins. Wow, I learned something today. I'm gonna add that to my dolphin hatred story. Wow, this is cool. Let's talk about Emilie. So, Emilie Conrad, founder of Continuum, never met her. Would have loved to. I did sit through her series of interviews. Actually, one of the inspirations for this podcast and the Embodiment Conference was that Emilie Conrad did a series of interviews with Judith Aston, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who else? Don Hanlon Johnson, sort of some of the greats of embodiment. And I was like, it was sort of like my top hit list for the Embodiment conference. Everyone who was in that interview series, the old school sort of California classics, and these wonderful juicy interviews. Now the word juicy is overused, but in this, Emilie just comes across as saucy almost. She seemed to have, I didn't met her, so tell me if I'm wrong, a sort of cheeky, sexy sauciness is how we call it in English, sauciness. Is that a fair read on her?
Absolutely.
I think we would have got off. I'm a bit sad to have not met her.
She was really fun. She was sassy. She was very intelligent, a person before her time. And she was a model. She was quite beautiful and a beautiful dancer. And just, how would I put it? A very precious person in my life. We were, we were very, very close, and I helped her through her dying process and everything, and the things that she shared, even in that time, and her bravery, her courage, was just amazing. And these people, I mean, I've had the fortune to get to know Don Hanlon Johnson, for instance. I love him. He's brilliant. Or Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. I mean, they're dear friends, and they, I loved how they were really, they used to teach together at Esalen in Big Sur and everything, and have these conferences. And it was just really amazing that somatics could get together that way and talk about things. I was really touched. Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, when I was talking to her one day, we were doing some videos of her, of what she remembered about Emilie. If you want, that's a great one on our website to go to and listen to. But what she was saying is what she felt like Emilie and what Continuum, how it was different, was that really Emilie was very spiritual, and she brought that spiritual quality into the movement and to the work, and I was really touched by that, because I feel that too.
Yeah, it's got a dash of that Haiti kind of not shamanic, but something else, like a dash of the spirit somehow, a dash of something other.
Right. Well, I could say that where shamanics comes from is where, that species, how shamanic has such a love for animals and the spirit and the potency of each animal. We have that too. So we
Animal-like, isn't it? Continuum. It's quite the part of me that's the kind of.
Well, we are animals. News
Yeah,
release.
that part of me. Folks sometimes look at me and they're like, "Are you a human or a dog?" They're kind of confused.
Beach monkey. I look at you, say beach monkey instantly.
Beach monkey. I can be a beach monkey. Right now, I'm kind of tan. I'm in my t-shirt. I'm in Mexico. I'm a beach monkey for a month. Anyway, I guess I live in Brighton as well, normally. So I guess I'm a beach monkey. I'll take it. Give me that brand, beachmonkey.com. Check that URL. Okay, and what about this thing that's happening around the world now? Is that a lot of the founders of the embodiment goes back thousands of years, right? And there was this sort of 1940s wave of kind of Reichian, neo-Reichian, but then really it sort of took off when Western psychotherapy collided with Eastern mindfulness in the 60s. Places like Esalen, places like mentioned Donnalea Van Johnson was right in the epicenter of that. A lot of the practices that sort of I inherited as the next generation came out. I think of the Embodiment conference as a sort of almost like another line. And okay, we're now in the virtual world. Esalen was in the 60s. We have the online world now. But round about the same time as the conference and this sort of new era, a lot of the founders of arts are passing away. So Emilie was one of the first. I'm going to 5 rhythms tonight, and the teacher, I don't think, met the founder Gabrielle Roth. So she's a fairly young teacher. She's been teaching a few years. I think the teacher may have met her or briefly met her, but certainly wasn't trained by her.
Oh, by Gabrielle Roth?
Yeah, but
I thought, because Gabrielle Roth and Emilie did meet.
Sure, so that generation moved, particularly in the States, right? And they could geographically, because most of them were in the US, very few of them are anywhere other than the US. Whereas now we've got teachers popping up in Russia and Iran, all over the place, right? They're not going to get together for coffee like, you and Stephen Porges can. So it's, but that generation are passing away. And she equally has fire rhythm sort of aphorisms and say, Gabrielle said this. They're sort of almost pathing into mythos.
I think we got to be careful. That mythos is very careful because we've got to keep somatics alive.
Right.
There's a Zen koan. I tell my students this all the time. No one, I can say, loves Emilie more than I do. I adore her and want to keep her alive, as and things. But if we do not, this is something Emilie and what Continuum really believes in, is that we can't live in the past. We have to live right here and now, and we have to keep changing, or else it will die. You can't just keep giving the past. There's a Zen koan. I point to the moon, but you're looking at my finger. Right. You ever heard that one?
Path kill him as well. It's like if you meet the ghost of Emilie Conrad. It's and also I'm noticing a lot of status claiming around this. So people saying, I was a direct student of Gabrielle Roth. We were very close. Gabrielle was like a mother to me. Like you're hearing this a lot, and I've heard this from the martial arts world before, because the martial arts world is kind of older, so it happened before. Right. It's happening this a long time ago. It was the founder of Aikido who died in the 60s, whatever. And it becomes a sort of status claim, and it's less about who actually has wisdom. And there's something in that, right? It's important to know that someone went through the training and has some heritage, some tradition, but it seems to be less about who actually can convey wisdom and more about just who happened to be around at the time.
Right. Certainly there, all of us that were able to spend time with Emilie and everything, what a gift. But I can tell you, her work is not limited to her being a human being on the planet from 19 whenever she was born to she died. It was, her work is universal and eternal. And I think that many of these other teachers are speaking of eternal work. And even though Emilie was what brought this forward, she was really bringing some old wisdom through, and organic biological wisdom. And we use science a lot. We love science in Continuum. It's why, I'm always, the conversations I can have with my scientist friends are just really great. And that's one of the things she really believed is keep it going. Don't stop it. Don't let it be just about that. It's got to keep on growing. If it doesn't evolve, it will die.
And there is a natural tendency to stagnate,
Right.
And I get it. And some people are naturally preservers, right? They say, hey, for example, there's a school of Aikido called Wama Aikido. And the people that are really into this are really like traditionalists, conservatives in the best possible sense of the word, preserving a very set tradition. Right. And it feels like there is a place for that, but they're certainly not wanting to evolve it. Though actually, it looks like it's evolving to me, but that's another story. But you sort of can't stop that thing happening. But so maybe there's a place for that preserving, but for me, if something's going to feel really alive, it needs to be researched of the time, not just referring back to a sacred text or a sacred set of YouTube videos it will become, won't it? But it's, I think this is almost becoming an issue of our times and will increasingly be as the founders of other major systems pass away in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, you said it earlier, Mark. So in Continuum, we see things as a spiral, and the water spirals, our body spirals. So you alluded to this at the beginning, that you like, sometimes it's good to start out learning form and then throw it away, and go into the formlessness. Art, I actually think sometimes some of the best artists actually had a very classical training early on and then could let go, because there does seem to be something that's different in that. So when I teach Continuum, I'm teaching a lot of people to become teachers at this point in time, and we do talk about Emilie and what her beliefs and how we learned it at that time. And we then talk about, but how about one of the big things of Continuum is innovation. If you do not keep innovation going, it it will just dissipate. And innovation, we've got to change for our times. If we tried to live like people did in the 1600s right now, we'd have a hard time. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when you say, well, who was this yoga designed for? You know,
yes,
young men in the 1940s in India. Okay, well, that's not an office worker who's a mother of two in New York today. You
right,
know, was this Aikido designed for? It's designed for samurai who had war hackers, and they had certain kinds of attacks they would get attacked with. And these, you start looking at the history of Aikido and you go, oh, okay, it makes more sense now why there's these moves or those moves. So
right.
it's, it is an interesting question to keep evolving it. And I'm definitely on the innovative spectrum if there was a personality spectrum for that. But I want to give the conservatives and preservers some credit too, I think. Okay, I mean, I mentioned conservative. We've come a little bit maybe full circle back to politics here. And, for me, there's something political in just following your body, not being told what to do. Actually, just in the basic practice, there's almost a political unindoctrination. What would be the word? What's the opposite of indoctrination?
Well, Mark, you are a natural born continuum person. I'm telling you, because that is one of our things that we talk about. That that if the way it's the body that a regime like, well, let's take Hitler. What did he do? How did he take power? He took over people's bodies and did spread fear and things like that. So the opposite of spreading safety and body, having freedom within your body, not marching and doing the goose step and things like that, but actually, the undulation that it just really changes it. Emilie, and favorite Emilieism is continuum is a political statement. Movement is a political statement. So
Not just a statement, I see it almost like if we've been taught, now we might not have been taught the goose step or, the sort of Stalinistic equivalent, but, in schools in Russia, they used to have to sit like this and ask a question like this, like this is very linear patterns they would condition bodies with in the same way as you'll see that in the military. Though we're all subject to some of those conditionings of authority, of control, even if we haven't been in the military or we haven't been in Nazi Germany. So there is it's not just a statement of freedom, it's a sort of retraining or an untraining in that sense. The unwinding of those patterns of conformity is almost how the Irish part of me loves it, by the way. It's the Irish part of me is like, oh, we're letting go of the English constraints, So it's more than just a statement.
yeah. Well, I mean the statement to be broader than just a verbal sentence. It's making a statement as far as a political action. That the freedom, of what was going through my mind is just thinking things like of all like the African tradition and how they actually kept their their sanity, their freedom through a movement and singing even when they were enslaved here, and then that was sort of outlawed, but they would secretly be able to do some of that. I mean, that is how I just can't say enough about its importance.
Yeah, I guess Haiti, a slave country, and then rebel, one of the first countries to sort of free itself from that. As I understand the history, my history is not great in that area. And there's I think of the African spirituals, the sounding of the pain and the freedom. There's a lot there, right? And
Right.
for me, it almost feels like taking off chains or taking off corsets. I imagine a Victorian woman ripping off her corset and getting her boobs out. Like there's a sort of freeing of the body in this.
Well, in Continuum, we talk about how much our culture constrains us. There, and you would be surprised because but you've been talking about it right here now. Your Irish self, the freedom of that versus, in English culture, there is a lot more of the, sit up straight, proper,
Of
and
course, it's a bit tighter in England.
when you come to the United States, it's one way. You go to Japan, it's another. So that's another thing that we don't even take in account, that our culture has so imprinted us and actually has formed us, and we don't even know that. People will argue with you and you go, but if you go look at it.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, I had a Lithuanian friend yesterday, and she's got a classic post-Soviet suspicion. She's in her late 30s, so she knew about, she grew up in the communist era a little bit. And I offered her a beer from my fridge, and I don't drink beer, but someone left one here, and I wanted to sort of get rid of it. I was like, hey, have a beer. And she's like, well, she was immediately suspicious. She was like, well, where's it from, and why don't you want it? And are you trying to get me? I was like, no, I just don't drink beer, and I thought you might like a cold beer. It's the hot, I thought you might like it, and she really thought that it was about the beer, but it wasn't. It was a cultural condition that's completely inappropriate for the situation, but that is her cultural embodied conditioning, to be suspicious. And we both laughed about it afterwards, because she sort of caught herself and was like, why am I being suspicious? Someone's trying to give me a gift here. But it was that's not a typical Mexican response to being offered a beer, I'm pretty sure. So it's
But her past, my doctorate is in psychology, somatic psychology, and you just can see it. People think you're brilliant and are amazing and one of the most highly intuitive people in the world when you start talking to them and point out things, but it's right there in the body. You can see.
Try that.
It's like it doesn't take. All you have to do is know a little bit about each person's cultures, and
You think it's okay to borrow from other cultures? Because, for example, I've taken a lot from Japanese martial arts, from some Brazilian forms, from different traditions I've studied. Emilie obviously was in Haiti. There's this term cultural appropriation. Like, is it okay to take from other cultures in our embodied practices, or is it only okay if we sort of honor them and respect them? Is there, what's the line there with me doing Indian yoga and this and that?
That's a really good question. But I think I, when we really get down to it, when we look at what we are as humans, I mean, we are so alike. So if you looked at our DNA, I don't think you could tell which culture they came from. Actually, we're very close to, as we were talking about primates, and we're actually even close to things that you think are very far away. Our DNA is actually very similar to. And so I see more about us coming into wholeness. One of my favorite shows is Star Trek. And I think
I love it.
I love it. And I realized a few years ago that, do you know that William Shatner is going to be 90 in about 2 weeks? Sue told me that yesterday. I was going, 90? How come William Shatner or Captain Kirk can't be 90? But anyway, back to my story. I got sidetracked. It was one of the most optimistic TV shows ever. Look, people from all these planets, and they do. I mean, I think the sharing of wisdom is our future, and the sharing of beauty, the sharing of the arts, the sharing of love. That is our future. I hope.
And for me, it's like my Japanese Aikido teachers desperately wanted me to have Aikido. It wasn't like I was stealing it from them. They were they made it their life's work to come to England and America and give the Aikido. And I guess as long as there's a respectful nod, like I certainly always have a respectful nod to the Japanese traditions and my heritage in that, and Indian traditions and different parts of culture. And yeah, I'd hate to be in a world where it was not okay to study other cultures, because I'm from England, so you'd all have to stop speaking English, wouldn't you, in America? to do your own language up. So, okay, I'm joking, of course. So,
well, it's so important. And the honoring is so important. And I mean, how can you honor anybody any more than to actually study their art and their and have your body participate in it? Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's an honoring of Japan. I
well, yeah, no, my Japanese Aikido teachers would certainly, they'd probably be confused some of the ways I've taken it, but like generally, what I've heard from the sons of the surviving teachers and things is they're very happy that I've taken it in new directions and things like that. Okay, so a couple of things to close then. Where do people find you on the internet? You mentioned some videos, some resources. Where do people go?
Continuummovement.com, at our website. You went on it and it has wonderful resources of great interviews. I've created programs like Memories of Emilie, that has Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and Don Johnson and Gary David and just some of her teachers. I mean, so that's where you can find out most.
Great. Yes. Joe will link that as ever. If people watch this on YouTube, they can get the links, or as ever, you can just listen, look it up, continuummovement.com. And a closing message about the body to finish.
Ooh. Connect, be with, and be present with. And believe that the fluid body is ever changing. The nature of fluid is change. And so do not ever feel that you're ever stuck or stagnant. You can keep on going with fluidity.
Wonderful. You won't be seeing me online because of the times for the next couple of classes, but I will be doing them recorded. So know I'm there in the background. I look forward to getting more into Continuum. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you.